You're not heartless. You're healing. And there's a difference. Let's talk about how healing changes the way you move. It's not about bitterness. It's about boundaries. It's not about revenge. It's about respect. When you've done the work, your access list gets shorter. Your peace gets pricier and your spirit gets sharper. And that's called growth. But let me set the record straight. You're not heartless. You're healing. And there is a big difference because listen, when you're done the work or you're doing the work, you don't argue like you used to. You don't over explain and you don't lose sleep over folks who should have lost access a long time ago. You finally got some boundaries and now folks are whispering, oh, she's changed. Oh, she's acting different. She's cold now, right? But let me correct the narrative real quick. You're not heartless. You're healing, and that is a big difference. Because here's the thing. You didn't change, you just outgrew dysfunction, right? And that's what healing looks like. So today, we're talking about how a healed heart moves differently, a healed eye sees differently, and a true woman healing doesn't roar unless she has to. Because some of us just need a reminder that we're not cold, we're just done being played with. So let's get into it. Hello, hello, hello. This is Linda, aka Lou, and welcome to another episode of Say It Forward with Lou. We are a community of healing, growth, creativity, and positivity. So let's dive in and sift through today's topic and chat. So, you ever notice how the moment you start moving different, people get in their feelings? You stop tolerating inconsistency and suddenly you're acting funny. You stop answering text at midnight and now you're doing too much. And you start choosing peace over drama and suddenly you're cold. But hear me when I say this. It's not heartlessness, it's healing. And there's a verse that I love, which is Proverbs 4:23. And it says, above all else, guard your heart, for it determines the course of your life. Now listen, guard your heart, right? Not put it up for auction, not leave it open like a 24-hour diner, but guard it. And when you do, that means some people just aren't getting the same access that they once had. It's like when you finally get TSA, I remember not having TSA pre-check, right? But when you finally get TSA pre-check and you don't go back to standing in the long security lines with people taking off the shoes, right? You don't explain it. You just keep moving like, hey, I'll see you in the sky lounge when you get through the security, right? That's what healing does. It changes the access policy. So let me break it down like this. A healed woman or a healing woman moves like a CEO. And have you ever seen a CEO explaining every company decision to every single employee? No, they don't beg people to respect their position. They just move accordingly. And the same thing with you when you're healing or healed, right? VIPs get the quality time, right? Associates, they get polite small talk, and distractions, well, they get blocked and bless. See you later. You just stop tolerating inconsistency and suddenly you're acting funny, right? You stop answering texts at midnight and now you're doing too much, right? And you start choosing peace over the drama and suddenly you're cold. Jesus himself set boundaries, right? He loves the multitudes, but he only discipled 12, right? And even within that, he had an inner three: Peter, James, and John. So let's be clear. Why are you letting everybody in? Because here's the reality. When you finally start treating yourself like the asset you are, you stop negotiating with liabilities. So let me break it down in a way that I hope you feel it and get it even more. So have you ever seen the movie ATL with T.I. and Lauren London? Well, there's a scene in class where the students are hot, right? And there's no AC, there's no air conditioning. And one of them asked the teacher, why don't we have air conditioning? And she hits them with, air conditioning is for honors classes. And that's kind of like an inner joke between me and my best friend of certain people that don't get access to certain parts of our lives anymore because we say, that's for honors classes, right? Because some of us need to really start treating our peace like that AC for honors classes, right? Certain people just are not in the honors class of your life anymore. And that's not about being rude. It's about recognizing the access is earned, not entitled. Because the reality is, when you finally again start treating yourself like the asset that you are, you stop negotiating with liabilities. I will say that again. When you start treating yourself like the asset that you are, you stop negotiating with liabilities. Because why? A healed eye starts to see differently. And what used to look like love now looks like a lesson, right? And one of the shifts after healing is what? Your vision changes, right? Your sight changes. You start to see things differently. And you no longer mistake inconsistency for mystery, right? Or you no longer see gaslighting as, well, it's just a misunderstanding. And you no longer confuse potential with proof, right? Because when you are healing or healed, you see the red flags before they turn into blazing sirens, right? Healing gives you discernment. You start to recognize patterns faster. You start to see manipulation sooner, and you sense when something isn't aligned, right? And you no longer explain away bad behavior, and you acknowledge it and you adjust accordingly. Because once you start healing, you realize some things were not love. They were just trauma bonding in disguise. And we talked about that in one of my earlier episodes, right? Because you're starting to heal the part of you that needed to be chosen, right? You no longer feel the need to prove your worth. And you start to now choose opportunities, relationships, connections based on alignment. What are your core values, right? And you choose connections based on alignment and not desperation, not loneliness, not needing to feel validated. Because why? We don't chase, we attract. And if I have to convince you, you're not for me. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone and the new is here. So you see, when God heals you, he doesn't just fix your heart. He upgrades your sight, right? Better than 2020 vision, right? And I remember a time when I would justify everything. Oh, maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm overreacting, right? But now, thank goodness, now I see things for what they are and not what I wish they were, right? And so this reminds me of the story of Saul before he became Paul. Acts 9:18. After his encounter with God, it says immediately something like scales fell from his eyes and he could see again. So what does that mean? It means healing doesn't just fix your heart. It removes the scales from your eyes. It removes what was clouding your vision. And some of us, right, if we're being real, we weren't blind, but we were looking through thick scales of denial, of hope, and wishful thinking, right? And we wanted to believe people were better than they were. You wanted to think they would change. You wanted to believe their words instead of their patterns, instead of their actions. But when healing happens, that's when the scales come off and you start to see with clarity, right? And listen, some of us, for that alone, oh God, a shout just for the stuff you don't fall for anymore because the scales are now removed from your eyes, right? And we have clarity in our vision, right? Because a healed woman stops auditioning for roles she was never meant to play. You don't chase. Why? Because you attract. You don't beg. Why? Because you believe. And you don't lower your standards because God didn't create you to shrink. You don't need everyone to see your value because God already established it, right? Jeremiah 1:5 says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. So what does that mean? Before anybody rejected you, God had already accepted you. Before anybody doubted you, God had already called you. And before anybody overlooked you, God had already set you apart. How wonderful. Like when you really think about it, how wonderful is that, right? You don't need to convince people of your worth. Your value isn't up for debate, right? It's already been established in God. Because listen, I love Proverbs 31, right? Because so many people focus on the work of the Proverbs 31 woman. But let's talk about the worth of her, right? Because Proverbs 31:10 says, a virtuous woman who can find, for her worth is far above rubies. Not silver, not gold, but rubies. Because a ruby isn't just valuable, it's rare, right? Because guess what? Rare things aren't found everywhere, right? They're not just sitting on every shelf. You can't just grab one and say, oh, here's a ruby, right? They're definitely not handed out to just anybody. So if God said your worth is far above rubies, why would you ever feel the need to prove yourself to someone who can't even recognize the value in front of them? I'll let you ponder on that a minute. Let it marinate a little bit in your spirit. Really think about that, right? And to make it more relatable in this day and age, Beyonce, people love Beyonce, right? But she doesn't argue about being the queen. She just is, right? And that's the energy we need to be on because listen, you know who you are and you have to stop negotiating with people who don't because we are women healing, right? So let's talk about now the power of our silent roar, right? I'm a Leo. And so lions don't roar unless they have to, right? If you ever know anything about a lion. So if you ever were to look at a lion in the wild, it doesn't roar all day. It doesn't explain its power, right? It just walks in it, right? And that's how a healed and healing woman moves. You don't over explain yourself. You don't argue for respect. You don't beg to be chosen. You just know who you are, right? Exodus 14:14 says, the Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. So How is that relatable, Lou? Right? Well, when you're healed, when you're healing, you don't have to roar at every offense, right? You just stand firm and let God handle it. Because why? You know who you are, right? And sometimes the best response is no response. When you're healed, when you're healing, you don't fight every battle. You just stand firm and you let God handle it. Just to recap, a lion doesn't need to explain its power. It just is. When you're healed and healing, you don't need to argue, prove your point, or fight for a seat at tables that don't honor you. You exit gracefully and move in silence, and you operate in peace. Healing didn't make you soft, it just made you selective. So I want you to remember this, right? You are not cold, you're just done being played with. You are still loving, still giving, still you, right? Just with better boundaries. Keep leading with love, but don't let a single person forget you don't entertain confusion. You don't have to explain your standards, and you don't have to roar unless you need to. And guess what? You don't need to anymore. So, a quick word of encouragement before we close out this episode. Healing is a journey, and that's something that I've said throughout the theme of the Say It Forward with Lou episodes. Healing is a journey. It's not linear, but it's a journey, and it's an ongoing journey. But the other side of it, it's peace, it's clarity, and a version of you that no longer bends and begs to be loved, right? So thank you for tuning in. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, send it to the group chat. And if you're stepping into your healed era, let me know, because I want you to keep your peace high, your access list short, and your roar on reserve. So thank you truly for tuning in to this episode of Say It Forward with Lou. And if this episode touched you, please do me a favor, like it, leave a review, and definitely share it with someone who needs this message today. Because listen, we all know at least one woman, right, who's reclaiming her peace and setting new boundaries. So send this truly to your group chat and let the whole crew know that we are not cold. We are just done being played with, right? So, if this resonated with you on an even deeper level, if you know it's time to move differently, set real boundaries, and step fully into the version of yourself that God always intended, let's talk. Let's chat about it and schedule a chit chat clarity call with me. And let's see if we can partner together in a coaching relationship. Because from one high achieving woman to another, we both know this journey is not meant to be taken alone, because healing is powerful, boundaries are necessary, and support, that's the game changer. So if you're ready, truly ready to step boldly into your next season with clarity, with competence and purpose, let's do it together. Click the link in the show notes and let's take this journey forward, right? So until next time, keep leading with love, keep guarding your peace, and never forget that a woman lion doesn't roar unless she has to. So thank you for tuning in to Say It Forward with Lou. And as always, stay tuned, stay a while, and let's continue to say it forward together. Take care.